I understand help, so we sent the most dangerous humans alive. Part 1. The Distress Call. The emergency alert blared through the Galactic Coalition headquarters, its harsh tone cutting through the usual gentle hum of activity. Ambassador Tay looked up from his work, tension immediately visible in his shoulders. Emergency alerts were rare in this peaceful sector of space. Incoming distress signal from Colony Epsilon, announced the communications officer, her voice steady despite the concern in her eyes. Priority 1. Tay moved swiftly to the central command table where holographic displays were already flickering to life. The face of a Luminar appeared, skin pale blue with characteristic silver markings around the eyes, now twisted in fear. This is Settlement Leader Nari of Colony Epsilon, the Luminar said, voice trembling. We are under attack by an unknown predatory species. Our defenses are failing. We have... The transmission cut out momentarily before returning with poorer quality. Casualties mounting. Please send immediate military assistance. The background behind Nari showed chaos. Luminars running, strange screeching sounds, and flashes of movement too quick to identify properly. They move like shadows, Nari continued desperately. They learn our patterns, adapt to our technology. We are a peaceful settlement. We have no weapons, no warriors. Please help us. The transmission ended abruptly with a haunting screech. Silence fell over the command center before Tay turned to his advisors. How long would it take our nearest peacekeeping vessel to reach Colony Epsilon? The strategic officer, Jun, checked his displays. At maximum speed, 7 standard days. The colony doesn't have 7 days, said a quiet voice from the back of the room. All heads turned toward Elder Kim, who rarely attended emergency sessions anymore. At over 300 years old, the silver-skinned Araxian was one of the original signatories of the Coalition Treaty. He moved slowly toward the command table, his ceremonial robes rustling softly. I've seen this pattern before, Elder Kim said, touching the display to rewind the footage. He pointed to the blurred movements in the background. Look at the attack formation. These are Vex. A collective intake of breath swept the room. The Vex were thought to be just stories to frighten children, apex predators from the darkest corners of the galaxy who hunted not just for food but for sport. If these truly are Vex, Elder Kim continued, conventional military response will fail. They adapt too quickly to standard tactics, and they specifically target command structures first. Ambassador Tay's face had gone pale. What do you suggest? Then, we cannot abandon the colony. Elder Kim's eyes showed both resignation and determination. There is only one species I know of that might stand a chance against the Vex, a species quarantined decades ago because the Coalition deemed them too unpredictable, too violent, too resourceful. No. Tay shook his head immediately. The Deathworlders are too dangerous. The quarantine protocols were established for good reason. The humans, Elder Kim said the word that everyone had been thinking, evolved on a planet that should have killed them 1,000 times over. Where most species developed one survival strategy and perfected it, humans developed hundreds and can switch between them instantly. Where we see their unpredictability as a danger, against the Vex, it might be salvation. The room erupted in protests. Coalition species had long memories and stories of human wars. Human ingenuity turned toward destruction, human stubbornness in the face of certain defeat. These were cautionary tales told throughout civilized space. We need warriors, Elder Kim's voice cut through the noise. The humans are adaptable in ways we cannot understand. They find solutions where none should exist. They continue fighting long past the point where any rational species would surrender. They're savages, someone called out. They're survivors, Elder Kim corrected. And right now Colony Epsilon needs survivors more than it needs our civilized helplessness. Ambassador Tay looked deeply troubled. The diplomatic incidents alone would set back human coalition relations by decades. There won't be any relations to worry about if we let an entire colony die when we could have acted, Elder Kim replied. Tay stared at the frozen image of the terrified Luminar on the screen. The Luminars were among the most peaceful species in the galaxy, telepathic, empathetic, completely incapable of violence even in self-defense. Their philosophy of absolute non-harm had produced some of the Coalition's greatest medical and technological innovations. "What exactly are you proposing?" Tay finally asked. "We don't need their armies," Elder Kim explained. "We need a small team of their most dangerous individuals, not soldiers who follow orders, but the ones who thrive in chaos, the ones their own kind consider unpredictable." Tay looked around the room at the other representatives, seeing the fear and uncertainty in their eyes. He had never visited Earth, never met a human in person. Few had. The quarantine had been in place since before his time in office. "Even if I agreed," Tay said, "the Council would never approve breaking the quarantine protocols." "Then don't ask them to break it," Elder Kim suggested. "Ask for a temporary exception, a specific mission with clear parameters." Tay took a deep breath and made his decision. "Establish emergency contact with Earth authorities. Tell them exactly what we're facing. And may the stars forgive us if we've invited something worse than the Vex into Coalition space." As the communications team hurried to prepare the message, Elder Kim moved close to Tay and spoke quietly. "You've made the right choice. Sometimes survival requires accepting help from those we fear." "I hope you're right," Tay replied, watching as the distress call from Colony Epsilon played again on a side screen. "Because right now I feel like I've just opened the cage to release one predator to fight another." Send help. So we sent the most dangerous humans alive. Part 2. The recruitment commander Park stood at the window of his office, watching rain streak down the glass as he contemplated the message that had arrived from space just hours ago. After decades of isolation from the galactic community, the Coalition had reached out, not with diplomacy, not with trade offers, but with a desperate plea for help. "They quarantine us for being too dangerous, then come running when they need. Dangerous people," he muttered, turning as his office door opened. Colonel Lee entered carrying 5 folders. "Sir, I've gathered the files you requested." "And you're sure these are the right people?" Park asked, moving to his desk. "Based on the Coalition's specific requirements?" "Yes, sir, though I have reservations about putting them all on the same team." Park nodded. "Show me." Lee placed the folders on the desk, opening the first one. Han Tai-wan, former Special Forces specialized in hostile environment operations. The man survived 3 weeks behind enemy lines during the resource wars, with nothing but a knife and what he scavenged. Coalition specifically mentioned his adaptability in unpredictable situations. The photo showed a man with a weathered face and calm eyes that seemed to be looking through the camera rather than at it. "His psych evaluation?" Park asked. "Stable, but with the usual Special Forces quirks. Prefers solitude, hyper-aware of surroundings, tendency to create weapons out of ordinary objects." Lee hesitated. He was discharged after an incident where he disregarded direct orders to abandon a civilian rescue mission. Saved the civilians, but military protocol? "Next," Park said, already understanding. Lee opened the second folder. Sun Min Ah. When her research station in the Arctic collapsed during a storm, she not only survived for 3 years alone, but created a sustainable habitat using the wreckage. Wrote the now standard manual on extreme environment survival after her rescue. The Mbiam woman in the photo had a quiet confidence in her expression, hair pulled back practically, eyes that had seen the worst weather on Earth and outlasted it. The Coalition specifically mentioned her ingenuity with limited resources, Lee added. Though they may not realize she's also an excellent shot. She had to hunt to survive. Park nodded and pointed to the next folder. Ji-hoon, Lee continued. Engineering genius with a flexible approach to physics and safety regulations. Created the emergency power system that saved New Singapore during the blackouts. Also built illegal modifications for racing vehicles before that. The man's photo showed bright, intelligent eyes and a half smile that suggested he knew something. You didn't. He sees solutions where others see junk, Lee explained. The Coalition mentioned needing someone who could repurpose alien technology without manuals or training. Park opened the fourth folder himself. Dae-sung, I know this name. You should, sir. He orchestrated the Peninsula banking hack 5 years ago. Never touched a computer himself, just manipulated people into giving him access. Psychological warfare expert. Lee tapped the file. Currently serves as a security consultant after his rehabilitation program. The photo showed a handsome man with an easy smile that didn't quite reach his calculating eyes. And the Coalition asked for him by name? They asked for someone who understands manipulation of predator psychology. Our analysts believe they're facing Vex raiders. If so, psychological warfare might be their best defense. Park frowned at the mention of the Vex, creatures humanity had only heard rumors of from the few Coalition communications they'd received over the years. And the last one? Lee opened the final folder. Dr. Yoon Jin-ah, xenobiologist specializing in predatory species behavior. Spent 7 years living alongside apex predators on 4 continents, documenting their hunting strategies. The woman's photo showed intense focus and a small scar running along her jawline. She understands how predators think, Lee said, and she survived more attacks than anyone should. Park leaned back in his chair, considering the 5 individuals. Have they been notified? Not yet, sir. Given the unique nature of this request and the fact that it would break quarantine protocols, we needed your authorization first. Park stood and walked back to the window. Humanity had been effectively cut off from galactic society for nearly 50 years. The Coalition had deemed them too unpredictable, too violent, too willing to take risks that threatened stability. And now those same qualities were exactly what the Coalition desperately needed. Bring them in, he said finally. But don't tell them why yet. I want to see them interact first. The room where they gathered was deliberately plain, a conference. Table, chairs, nothing to distract from the assessment taking place. Park watched through one-way glass as the 5 candidates sized each other up. Han sat with his back to the wall, eyes constantly scanning. Sun arranged her few belongings with precise efficiency. G fidgeted with a pen he'd taken apart and was now reassembling differently. Day chatted easily with the military personnel, gathering information. Dr. Yoon observed everyone with professional interest. Interesting group, Lee commented, standing beside Park. They haven't asked why they're here. They're all used to unusual requests, Park replied. Time to give them one more. He entered the room and 5 pairs of eyes immediately focused on him. No salutes, no formalities. These weren't typical military personnel. Thank you all for coming, Park began. I imagine you're wondering why 5 people with your particular skill sets have been gathered. Government work, off the books, Day said with a slight smile. Something requiring deniability. Park placed a small device on the table. It projected a holographic image of the distress call from Colony Epsilon, showing the Luminar's terrified face and the chaos in the background. This message arrived 6 hours ago, Park explained. For the first time since the quarantine began, the Galactic Coalition has asked for humanity's help. He watched their reactions carefully. Surprise, certainly, but also immediate analysis of the problem presented. Those movement patterns in the background. Dr. Yoon leaned forward, eyes narrow. Coordinated pack hunters. Intelligent. Han nodded, in agreement. Attack formation, they're hurting the colonists. The technology looks advanced but fragile, G commented, staring at the colony structures visible in the hologram. Beautiful design, though. The Luminars, Sun said quietly. Telepathic species, completely non-violent. I read about them in the brief xenobiology reports we received before the quarantine. Day simply watched the others, gathering insights from their reactions. Park turned off the projection. The colony is under attack by what the Coalition believes are Vex raiders. Their nearest military support is 7 days away. The colony will not survive that long. And they want us to go? Sun asked directly. Yes, you specifically. Why us? Han's voice was calm, but suspicious. The Coalition has advanced technology, numerous species with various capabilities. Why ask humans? Park's mouth tightened into a grim smile. Because sometimes what you need isn't the most advanced weapon. It's the most unpredictable one. They're afraid of us, Day observed. Have been for decades. Now they're afraid of something else more. Precisely, Park confirmed. The Coalition quarantined humanity because they feared our capacity for violence, our history of conflict, our willingness to take risks they consider irrational. Now they need exactly those qualities. Dr. Yoon leaned forward. What exactly would be our mission parameters? Save the colony by any means necessary, Park said simply. You'll have limited Coalition technology and whatever you can bring from Earth that fits on a small transport vessel. You leave in 6 hours if you accept. And after? Sun asked. Assuming we succeed and survive? Park spread his hands. Unknown. This is unprecedented territory. You might open doors for humanity's return to galactic society, or you might confirm their worst fears about us. The 5 exchanged glances, a silent evaluation taking place. I'll go? Han said first. I've seen enough people die when help could have arrived. The xenobiological research opportunity alone is worth the risk, Dr. Yoon added. G grinned. Alien tech to play with? Count me in. I've survived worse odds, Sun said with a shrug. All eyes turned to Day, who smiled slightly. Well, I can hardly pass up the chance to psychologically manipulate an entirely new species, can I? Park nodded, unsurprised by their acceptance. These 5 had been selected for both their skills and their willingness to leap into the unknown. Get your affairs in order and report to Launch Facility Delta in 3 hours. And remember, the fate of our species' future in the galaxy may well rest on what the 5 of you do on that colony world. As they filed out, Park hoped he hadn't just sentenced them to death, or worse, sentenced humanity to another century of isolation if they proved the Coalition's fears correct. Send help. So we sent the most dangerous humans alive. Part 3. Arrival and Assessment. The human transport vessel shuddered as it entered Colony Epsilon's atmosphere. Inside the cramped cabin, the 5-person team checked their equipment one last time. They had spent the 3-day journey studying everything known about the Luminars and the limited information available on the Vex. Han secured his tactical vest, the pockets filled with tools rather than weapons. Coalition protocols had strictly limited what Earth could send. No military-grade weapons, no explosives, just humanitarian assistance. 2 minutes to landing, announced the automated pilot system. Anyone else find it interesting that they're desperate enough to ask for our help, but not desperate enough to let us bring proper weapons? G asked, tightening the straps on his pack of modified engineering tools. Sun shrugged. We've all made do with less. Besides, Dr. Yoon added, conventional weapons might not work against the Vex. From what I could analyze in that distress footage, they have some form of adaptive exoskeleton. The ship jolted violently, throwing them against their restraints. That wasn't atmospheric turbulence, Han said, eyes narrowing. A warning light flashed on the control panel. Perimeter defense system malfunction, the computer announced calmly. Emergency landing protocols engaged. Translation, we're being shot at, Day said, his voice remarkably steady. Seems our welcoming committee isn't the Luminars. The ship dropped like a stone, auto-stabilizers working overtime to prevent a crash. Through the viewport, they caught glimpses of a once beautiful settlement now partially in ruins. Graceful spires lay toppled across plazas, gardens were trampled, and there were dark shapes moving with disturbing speed between buildings. They hit the ground hard enough to rattle teeth, the landing struts absorbing most of the impact before one gave way, tilting the ship at an awkward angle. Everyone out, Han ordered, not waiting for the ramp to fully deploy before jumping down, scanning for immediate threats. The others followed quickly, forming a defensive circle as they assessed their surroundings. They had landed in what appeared to be a central plaza, now eerily silent. The air smelled strange, sweet and metallic at once. Movement 2 o'clock, Sun whispered, her hand moving to the hunting knife at her belt, one of the few bladed items the Coalition had reluctantly permitted. From behind a fallen column, a slender figure emerged slowly, hands raised in what was clearly meant to be a non-threatening gesture. The Luminar was taller than a human, with iridescent blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the colony's afternoon sunlight. Silver markings around its large eyes caught the light as it approached. Cautiously, "You are the humans?" the Luminar asked, voice musical despite the obvious fear. Han stepped forward. "Yes, I'm Han, team leader. This is Sun, Ji, Dae, and Dr. Yoon. The Coalition sent us to help. I am Jin, assistant to the colony administrator." The Luminar's eyes darted nervously toward the shadowed areas between buildings. "We must move quickly. They hunt most actively during daylight cycles." Jin led them through the ruins at a brisk pace, occasionally stopping to listen intently, though whether with ears or telepathic senses, the humans couldn't tell. They passed evidence of the attack everywhere: broken technology, abandoned possessions, and worst of all, dark stains on the ground that no one wanted to examine too closely. "How many survivors?" Dr. Yoon asked as they ducked through a partially collapsed archway. 87, Jin replied. "From a colony of 312. No one responded to that. The number spoke for itself. They arrived at an underground shelter cleverly disguised as part of the colony's water reclamation system." Jin pressed his palm against what looked like an ordinary wall panel, and a section of flooring slid away, revealing stairs leading down. The shelter below was crowded with Luminars of all ages. Some lay injured on makeshift beds, being tended by others. All showed signs of exhaustion and terror. When the humans entered, a collective flinch went through the room, followed by a strange ripple effect as whispers, both vocal and presumably telepathic, spread. A Luminar with deeper blue skin and more elaborate markings approached them. "I am Nari, colony administrator, the one who sent the distress call." Her gaze moved over the 5 humans, lingering on their hands, their posture, the tools they carried. "You are smaller than I expected." Han almost smiled. "We get that. A lot." "Where is your military force?" Nari asked, looking behind them as if expecting more humans to appear. "We are the force," Sun stated simply. The look of dismay on Nari's face would have been comical in other circumstances. "We need to understand what we're facing," Han said, getting straight to business. "Tell us everything about these attacks." Jin guided them to a small alcove with a holographic display. "The first attack came 16 days ago. No warning." The display showed a normal day in the colony, then sudden chaos as dark forms moved with terrifying speed through crowds of panicking Luminars. "They took 12 colonists in that first attack," Nari continued. "We thought perhaps it was some kind of misunderstanding, that they were another spacefaring species attempting contact in their own way." Dr. Yoon leaned forward, studying the grainy footage. "These aren't sentient explorers, these are hunters." "We realized that when they returned the next day," Jin said quietly. "They had learned our defenses, found ways around them. Each attack, they adapt." Ji pointed to something on the footage. "Freeze that frame." When Jin complied, Ji reached out to touch one of the attacking forms. "Look at their limbs. They're carrying components of your own security systems." "They don't just adapt," Dai realized. "They learn, integrate, and improve." The humans exchanged troubled glances. This was worse than they'd expected. "Show us your defenses, what's left of them," Han requested. "And we need to see a Vex up close," Dr. Yoon added. "Dead or captured if possible." Nari's expression became even more troubled. We cannot. You haven't killed any of them," Sun stated, understanding immediately. "Not even in self-defense." "Violence is not our way," Jin explained. "Even in these circumstances, we cannot bring ourselves to harm another living being. It is physically impossible for us." Han rubbed his forehead. "So you have no weapons, no defensive combat experience, and no way to even study these creatures up close because you can't bring yourselves to capture or kill one." "That is correct," Nari admitted. "What about your technology?" Ji asked. "The Coalition report said Luminars have advanced energy manipulation systems. Our technology is designed for creation, not destruction," Jin said. though the Vex have found ways to repurpose some of it. As if to punctuate this statement, a distant alarm sounded. The luminars in the shelter froze, a wave of fear passing visibly through them. "They've breached the eastern perimeter," Nari whispered. "The third time today. Each time they get closer to finding this shelter." Han turned to his team. "Sun, G, with me. We need to see these things in action. Day, Dr. Yoon, stay here and gather more information." As Han's group prepared to leave, a young Luminar child approached G, staring at the tools hanging from his belt. "Will you hurt the bad things?" the child asked. G knelt down to eye level with the child. "We're going to help keep you safe." The child's parent quickly pulled them away, eyeing the humans with both hope and trepidation. "They're afraid of us," Sun observed quietly as they headed for the exit. "Good," Han replied, "because from what I've seen so far, someone on this planet needs to be capable of doing what these people can't." As they ascended toward the surface, ready to face the Vex for the first time, Han couldn't help but appreciate the irony. Humans had been quarantined for being too violent, too unpredictable, too willing to fight when other options existed. Now those exact qualities might be the only thing standing between this peaceful species and extinction. The three humans moved silently toward the eastern perimeter, about to come face to face with the creatures that had terrorized the colony. Whatever philosophical debates might exist about humanity's place in the galaxy would have to wait. Right now, they had a job to do, and they were uniquely qualified to do it. Send help. So we sent the most dangerous humans alive. Part 4. The counterattack. They're not just predators, they're collectors. Han's voice was grim as he laid out the team's findings on the makeshift war table, a repurposed dining surface in the underground shelter. 3 days had passed since their arrival. 3 days of observation, near misses, and one terrifying encounter that had left Han with a long gash across his forearm, now bandaged with luminar healing film that glowed faintly blue. "Collectors?" Nari asked, her large eyes troubled. Dr. Yoon pointed to the rough sketches she'd made based on the team's observations. "They take your technology, your tools, even parts of your defensive systems, and they incorporate them into themselves. These aren't just mindless hunters, they're building something." The Vex, as it turned out, were nightmarish combinations of biology and stolen technology. 6-limbed with segmented bodies, their natural exoskeletons were now augmented with pieces of luminar tech. Communication arrays worked into their carapaces, energy conduits running along their limbs. "And they're coordinated," Sun added. The 3 we tracked were working together, herding colonists toward a larger group waiting in ambush. The gathered luminars shuddered visibly. Their telepathic connection meant that fear spread through them like ripples in water. "We can use that," Day said suddenly, looking up from the tablet where he'd been making notes. "Their coordination, their adaptation. Those aren't just strengths, they're predictable patterns." G nodded enthusiastically. "I've been analyzing their tech integration. They're efficient but not creative. They use your technology exactly as designed, just repurposed for hunting. They don't reimagine it." Han turned to the colony administrator. "That's why the coalition sent us. Humans don't just adapt, we reinvent." "What are you proposing?" Nari asked. "A counterattack," Han said simply. "But not conventional warfare. We need to fight them in ways they won't expect and can't adapt to quickly. We need to make the hunters feel hunted," Sun said, a gleam in her eye that made several luminars step back instinctively. Day smiled slightly. "Psychological warfare, my specialty." "We'll need to work fast," Dr. Yoon cautioned. "Based on attack patterns, we've got maybe 2 days before they find this shelter." Han looked at the assembled colonists. "We'll need volunteers, and we'll need access to all your remaining technology." Jin stepped forward hesitantly. What would we need to do? We cannot harm—" "You won't have to," Han assured him. "But you can distract, deceive, and disrupt." G pulled out several makeshift diagrams. "I've designed modifications for your atmospheric regulators. With some adjustments, they can emit frequencies that should disrupt the Vex sensory organs. And pure telepathy. Dr. Yoon added, turning to the colonists. You've been trying to block it, to hide your thoughts from each other out of fear. But what if we use it instead? Create a coordinated network that moves and acts as one. Sun stepped up to the table. I can teach you how to move, how to evade. Survival isn't just about fighting. It's about not being where danger is. The plan came together over the next 18 hours. Sleep was a luxury none of them took. G worked feverishly with a small team of Luminar engineers, repurposing their technology in ways they had never imagined. Their expressions shifted from horror to fascination as they watched him dismantle their precious devices only to rebuild them with deadly new purposes. In a corner of the shelter, Sun worked with groups of colonists, teaching them to move silently, to create distractions, to use their environment. Your bodies are naturally agile, she explained to a group of young Luminars. You just never needed to use that agility to hide before. Dr. Yoon and Day collaborated on what he called perception manipulation. Using the Luminars' telepathic abilities, they created a system that would project false emotional signatures to confuse the Vex. Your telepathy is instinctive, Dr. Yoon explained, but you need to learn to project deliberately. Focus on emotions the Vex would never expect from prey: aggression, hunger, predatory intent. The Luminars struggled with the concept, but tried their best. For a species that had evolved without the need for deception, the idea of deliberately projecting false thoughts was nearly incomprehensible. Han worked with Jin and Nari on strategic planning, mapping the colony and identifying choke points where they could funnel the Vex. We don't need to kill them all, Han explained, noting the relief on the administrators' faces. We just need to make this colony too costly a target. Predators are efficient. They don't waste energy on prey that fights back too hard. By the second day, the first pieces of their plan were ready for deployment. G had converted atmospheric regulators into sonic weapons. Sun had trained teams of Luminars in evasion tactics. Day had worked with the most telepathically gifted to create confusion patterns. It's time, Han announced. Today we change the dynamic. Today, the hunt had become the hunters. The Vex attacked at midday as they had done consistently. 6 of them moved through the colony ruins, their movements precise and coordinated. They had learned the patterns of the remaining colonists, had adapted to previous hiding spots and escape routes. What they found instead were false targets, holographic projections of Luminars that disappeared when approached, sonic emitters that disoriented their sensitive receptors, and most confusing of all, emotional projections that made no sense, prey that didn't feel fear, but projected predatory hunger instead. From his observation point, Han watched the first sign of hesitation in the Vex movements. They paused, communicated with clicks and electronic pulses, then split up. A new tactic. They're adapting, he said into his communicator. Just as we expected. Phase 2. Across the colony, G activated the repurposed atmospheric system. A high-pitched noise, just at the edge of human hearing, but devastating to the Vex sensory array, filled the air. 2 of the creatures collapsed immediately, their integrated technology shorting out in sparks of blue electricity. It worked. G's excited voice came through the comm. The frequency disrupted their neural network, but the remaining Vex were already changing, their carapaces shifting to block the sound. Adaptation in real time, exactly as Dr. Yoon had predicted. Sun, now, Han ordered. From multiple hiding spots throughout the colony, teams of Luminars emerged, moving in the unpredictable patterns Sun had taught them. They didn't approach the Vex, didn't attack. They simply created chaos, making it impossible for the predators to focus on any single target. And through it all, the telepathic projections continued. Instead of fear, the Luminars broadcast confusion, disorientation, and strange emotions the Vex had never encountered from prey before. Han watched as one Vex actually retreated from a group of Luminars, the first time the colonists had ever seen one of the creatures back away. It's working, Nari whispered beside him, her eyes wide with amazement. They're confused. Predators rely on patterns, Han explained. When the patterns break down, When prey doesn't behave like prey anymore, their entire hunting strategy collapses. The remaining Vex regrouped near the colony's central plaza, clearly communicating rapidly. Their movements had lost the fluid confidence of apex predators. Now they moved jerkily, constantly scanning in all directions. "Time for the final phase," Han said into his comm. "Day, you're up." In the command center, Day activated the colony-wide communication system that G had modified. The sound that emerged wasn't particularly loud or frightening to human ears. A simple recording of earth wolves howling, mixed with whale song and tiger growls, layered and distorted. To the Vex, however, it was the sound of something higher on the food chain, something that hunted hunters. The effect was immediate. The Vex scattered, no longer coordinated, each fleeing in a different direction. As they reached the colony perimeter, more sonic emitters activated, herding them toward the landing pads, where their own vessels waited. "They're retreating," Dr. Yoon confirmed from her observation post. "Completely abandoned their hunting formation. They're actually fighting each other to get onto their ships." Within an hour, the Vex vessels had departed Colony Epsilon's atmosphere. The humans and Luminars watched on the tracking system as the ships accelerated away, not into orbit, but out of the system entirely. In the shelter, the celebration was subdued at first, Luminars embracing silently, their telepathic joy washing through the room in gentle waves. But as the reality sank in, voices rose in a sound none of the humans had heard before. Luminar laughter. Jin approached the human team, his silver-marked eyes bright with emotion. "You saved us without taking a single life, even their lives." The wonderment in his voice was unmistakable. Han shrugged, uncomfortable with the gratitude. "We used what we had, what you had, really." "No," Nari said, joining them. "We had technology, but not the imagination to use it this way. We had telepathy, but not the concept of using it offensively." "That's the thing about humans," Dai said, with a slight smile. "We can make a weapon out of anything, even peace. Send help." So we sent the most dangerous humans alive. Part 5. Victory and Legacy. The morning light spilled across Colony Epsilon's central plaza, now transformed from a battlefield back into something resembling its original purpose. 2 weeks had passed since the Vex retreat, and the evidence of renewal was everywhere. Han sat on a partially rebuilt wall, watching Luminar children play in the newly cleared space. Their movements had changed since the team's arrival. Still graceful, but now with purpose, awareness. They no longer moved in predictable patterns, instead incorporating the evasion techniques Sun had taught them into their games. "Quite a change," Dr. Yoon commented, joining him on the wall. She handed him a cup of something warm and fragrant, the Luminar's version of tea. "They're adapting," Han said, nodding toward the children. "Not just rebuilding what was here before." Across the plaza, G was working with a group of Luminar engineers. They had torn apart the sonic weapons now that the immediate danger had passed, but were rebuilding the technology into an early warning system that would detect Vex ships long before they reached the colony. "I never thought I'd see them so comfortable with dismantling their own tech," Dr. Yoon remarked. "They used to treat these systems like sacred objects." "Sometimes protection requires reinvention," Han replied. "They understand that now." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Sun and Day walked toward them, accompanied by Jin and Nari. The Luminars had abandoned their formal administrative robes for more practical clothing that allowed easier movement. Another small change that signified larger shifts in their thinking. "The coalition ship is entering orbit," Nari announced. "They'll be landing within the hour." Han nodded, his expression neutral. The team had known this moment would come. The emergency response, the bending of quarantine rules, it had always been temporary. "Ambassador Tay is on board," Jin added. "He wishes to speak with all of you." "I bet he does," Day said with a wry smile. "I imagine the reports they've been getting have raised some interesting questions." News of the humans' success had spread quickly through coalition space. The daily updates from Colony Epsilon had documented not just the retreat of the Vex, but the methods used, methods that challenged everything the Coalition thought they knew about humanity. "They expected us to slaughter the Vex," Sun said bluntly, "to confirm every fear they had about humanity's violent nature. Instead, you showed them another way," Jin said. "You taught us to defend ourselves without abandoning our principles." The team exchanged glances. None of them had expected this outcome when they first arrived. They had come prepared for combat, for hard choices and harder actions. Instead, they had found a path that honored both human ingenuity and Luminar values. "Let's not get sentimental," Han said, standing up. "We still have work to do before they land." The Coalition vessel was significantly larger than the transport that had brought the human team. It settled onto the landing pad with precision, its sleek design contrasting sharply with the partially reconstructed colony buildings around it. A delegation of Luminars led by Nari waited at a respectful distance. Behind them stood the 5 humans, dressed in the clean clothes provided by the colony but still visibly different, their postures alert, their eyes constantly scanning the surroundings out of habit. The ship's ramp extended smoothly, and Ambassador Tay descended, flanked by 2 Coalition security officers. His silver-skinned face betrayed no emotion, but his body language suggested tension. "Administrator Nari," he greeted, inclining his head. "The Coalition Council sends its deepest regrets for your losses and its gratitude that the situation has been resolved." Nari stepped forward. "The situation was not resolved, Ambassador. It was actively prevented from becoming worse through the direct intervention of our human allies." Tay's gaze shifted to the 5 humans. "Yes, we have received your reports. They were unexpected." "You mean we didn't massacre the Vex?" Tay said, his voice pleasant but his eyes sharp. "Sorry to disappoint." "On the contrary," Tay replied carefully. "The Council is most interested in the methods you employed. Defensive rather than offensive, psychological rather than physical." Han stepped forward. "We used what was available. That's what humans do." "Indeed." Tay gestured toward the colony. "May I?" Nari led the way toward the central plaza, where the most visible reconstruction efforts were underway. As they walked, Jin explained the new systems being put in place: early warning networks, coordinated response protocols, telepathic defense training. "You've incorporated human tactical thinking into your colony design," Tay observed, watching, as a group of Luminars practiced Sun's evasion techniques. "We've incorporated human adaptability," Nari corrected. "There is a difference." They reached the community hall, recently cleared of debris and repurposed as a meeting space. Inside, holographic displays showed the colony's new defense plans, alongside reconstruction timelines. "The Coalition security forces will remain to protect the colony," Tay announced. "They will arrive within the week. And as for you," he turned to the human team, "arrangements have been made for your return to Earth." A silence fell over the room. The humans had expected this, of course. The quarantine rules had only been temporarily suspended for this emergency. "Actually," Nari said, stepping forward, "we have formally requested that the human team remain as advisors." Tay's expression registered surprise. "That would require an exemption from quarantine protocols. The Council will need to recognize that their assessment of humanity was incomplete," Jin interrupted. "They saw the capacity for violence and deemed it too dangerous. They failed to see the capacity for creative problem-solving that comes from the same source." Dr. Yoon watched this exchange with interest. The Luminars had always been considered one of the most diplomatic species in the Coalition, rarely challenging authority directly. Yet here they were, standing firm against Coalition policy. "The Vex will return," Han said quietly. "Maybe not here, maybe not soon, but somewhere in Coalition space, and when they do, you'll need people who think differently than you do." Tay looked troubled. "The quarantine was implemented for good reasons. Humanity's history is exactly what saved us," Nari cut in. "Their history of overcoming challenges, of surviving against impossible odds, of finding solutions where none seem to exist. These are not traits to be feared, Ambassador. They are traits to be valued." The argument continued as they toured more of the colony. At each stop, Tay saw evidence of how human ingenuity had blended with Luminar technology, not replacing their peaceful ways but complementing them with practical defenses. By the time they returned to the landing pad, the sun was setting, bathing the colony in golden light. Luminar children were helping G install the final components of the early warning system, their natural telepathic abilities making the calibration process surprisingly efficient. "They've changed," Tay observed, watching the children. "They've grown," Sun corrected. "There's a difference." Ambassador Tay was silent for a long moment. "I will take your request to the council," he finally said, "along with my own observations. I cannot promise what their decision will be." "Tell them this," Han said, his voice firm but not confrontational. "Humanity doesn't want to join the galactic community to conquer or dominate. We want to join because the universe is full of challenges that require different ways of thinking. We solve problems differently than you do. Sometimes that's exactly what's needed." As Tay prepared to return to his ship, a small Luminar child broke away from the group working with G and ran up to Han. Without hesitation, the child offered him a small object, a crystal that glowed with soft blue light. "For protection," the child said simply before running back to the group. Han closed his hand around the crystal, nodding his thanks. The gesture wasn't lost on Ambassador Tay. "In the 50 years since the quarantine began," Tay said quietly, "I have never seen a Luminar child approach a non-Luminar so trustingly. Perhaps we have more to learn from each other than the council realized." As the coalition ship lifted off, the human team gathered with the colony leaders to watch it disappear into the evening sky. "Think they'll actually change the quarantine rules?" Day asked skeptically. "They'll have to," Dr. Yoon replied. "The Vex threatened their perfect, peaceful vision of galactic society. They now understand they need more than just advanced technology and diplomatic protocols to survive." Nari turned to the humans. "Whatever the council decides, you have a place here if you wish it. Colony Epsilon will always welcome you." Han looked around at the colony, at the blend of beautiful Luminar architecture now reinforced with practical defenses, at the children playing games that doubled as survival training, at the sense of confident purpose that had replaced fear. "The galaxy quarantined humanity because they feared what we might destroy," he said. "Maybe now they'll see what we can help build instead." As night fell, the stars emerged overhead, the same stars visible from Earth, yet somehow different when viewed from this perspective. Somewhere out there, the Vex were licking their wounds, adapting, learning. And somewhere else, the Coalition Council was having uncomfortable conversations about the nature of humanity and its place in them. Galaxy change was coming one way or another, and if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was adapting to change.